Good afternoon to one and all. We are feeling privileged to have with us today Mr. Ajay Baxi, the Director HR, Vodafone India Limited. Sir has done his MBA in Marketing Human Resources from Pune University in 1993 to 95. Sir has a degree in Mechanical Engineering and he also has a Master's degree in Business Administration. Sir have over 20 years experience as an HR professional in both journalist and specialist roles in leading multinational organizations and Indian organizations such as Prudential, Gillette, Castrol, Vedanta Group and many more. Currently, Sir is working with Vodafone Shared Services India as Director HR. Sir have been instrumental in design and implementing process involving competency framework, organization design and reconstructing. Leadership development intentions including strategic ties up with leading management and engineering institutes in curriculum design and implementation of executive development programs, OD session planning and strategic. Compensation and benefit including design and implementation of ESOP schemes, leadership, hiring statutory compensation, etc. A certified executive coach and executor of a Prudential's Global Assessment Center and Management Development Programs, certified on physiconomic tests like DISC and OPQ32 and organ inventory. Sir specializes in talent management, leadership development, learning and development, strategic human resources, organization development, and reconstructing compensation and benefits, employee engagement, and employee relation. Now, I would request Sir to come up on stage and enlighten us with words of wisdom. Sir, the podium is all yours.
I think a very good afternoon to all young budding professionals and managers in the making. Thank you very much for the kind words here. So I'm not here to enlighten you. Let me be very, very honest here. I'm just here to share certain experiences here with the hope that some of these experiences will help you progress in your career and for you to contribute and drive organizations effectively, whichever organizations you choose to work for. The presentation is structured into three parts here. The first part I'll talk to you about what do industries really look at when it comes down to students here and young managers and young professionals. What are some of the key attributes, what are some of the key competencies which we look at when we are hiring people, when we are promoting people, and when we are developing people. The second part which I'll talk to you about in terms of your own career, how do you plan your career? And the third part here, I'll be more than happy to take on any questions which you have. I'll also share with you my own personal career journey, how it's been. So that's how I plan to cover the next 60 odd minutes of my time with you. So to start with here, in terms of what do organizations look at when we hire young talent? So when we hire young talent here, the first thing we look at, we do expect that they have a basic set of technical capabilities on the course which they've attended. So technical capabilities, if you're hiring an engineer, we would definitely expect them to be fundamentally strong on some of the basics. Likewise, if you're hiring a chartered accountant, we would expect them to be strong on fundamentals of finance. We don't expect them to be subject matter experts, largely because we are aware that in the initial part of their academic career, they are trained to be more generalists and they are given more of a high-level orientation than an in-depth knowledge. So we are aware of that. But if your foundations are not strong, then clearly it doesn't fit the bill there. So that's one part which we look at, is a very strong foundation in whatever course you've done. The second part which we look at in hiring people is what is their orientation towards learning. When we talk about orientation to learning here, we look at what have they really learned in the course. And we do ask this question here, what have you learned from the course? Learning isn't restricted only to academics. It goes well beyond that. So what have they learned? Have they participated in any extracurricular events? Have they worked as team players? Have they demonstrated any leadership attributes? at the time of working. The other critical part which we look at when we are hiring talent, young talent especially, is are they willing to work collaboratively as team players? While they will start off as individual contributors doing a particular part of the job, but they would need to operate in teams. Today, whether it's business success, corporate success, or team success, it's not one individual who drives its success, it's a team which drives success. And if people work purely as individuals, they may be great guys, they may be highly intelligent, but they won't necessarily be great contributors to the business. So we look at team players as well. The other dimension we look at, especially when we are hiring professionals, is the entire personal impact. In organizations which are global, for example, like in our organization, in Vodafone, we have people, we have engineers, with 2 years of experience interacting with global clients, directly interacting with them on a day-to-day basis. So they will be interacting, let's say, in the morning with a German, or let's say, I won't say in the morning, in the afternoon with a German, and in the latter part of the day or the evening with an American. During that time, they'll be interacting with a British national, they'll be interacting with a Spanish stakeholder, with a Portuguese stakeholder, with an Italian stakeholder. So the ability to interact with global stakeholders becomes an important part. The way you communicate, the way you put your thoughts across becomes equally important as compared to the knowledge which you carry. So that's another part which we look at when we are hiring talent. We also look at talent who's keen to learn, who's inquisitive, who's customer obsessed, willing to stretch that extra mile to meet customer needs here. Clearly, we don't look at talent who comes, does a 9 to 6 kind of a job and goes back. See, in today's world, which is highly competitive, where you really need to stretch and give the competitive edge, I think we need talent who doesn't look at the clock here. Of course, not that we really are looking at running a sweatshop, but at the same time, you can't be bound by time. We are looking at people who are willing to make that investment in themselves. While, of course, the organization contributes to your development, your growth, etc., but the individual is equally responsible. So we're looking at people who are really keen to learn, grow, and take that extra bit for themselves. Last but not the least, in this case, we look at talent who is highly ambitious and willing to stretch that extra mile. So these are some of the fundamental capabilities or competencies which we look at when we are hiring talent, when we are promoting talent and growing talent here. A lot of these competencies are equally applicable, not only at the entry level, but also the mid-level and senior levels. Of course, the extent and the proficiency level of these competencies will vary as you grow up the ladder, where areas like strategic thinking, leadership skills will play a more important role as you grow in your career. So these are some of the fundamental competencies which you look at when we are hiring talent. And of course, like I said, developing and growing talent as well. The other part which I'd like to highlight here is, some of the experiences which we have had as a corporate. Now, and I'll share certain personal experiences here. Having got the opportunity in my career to launch some of the global talent programs, not in my current organization, but in one of my previous ones, where I was heading the talent program for UK and Europe in Prudential. As a part of that role there, my key responsibility was running a talent program at 3 levels. One at the entry level, ensuring that we run a global program by tying up with some of the top-notch Tier 1 institutes in UK, which included Cambridge, Oxford, and the University of Bath. So anchoring a program which we called as a graduate program there. A graduate program is equivalent to a management training program in India. The second part was identifying middle-level managers who have the capability to be senior talent for the future. And third is, at the senior talent, who amongst the senior talent would be successors for the roles of a CEO, a CFO, an HRD, etc. So again, 3 different levels of talent, 3 different profiles of talent, and you need to run 3 different programs for that. So starting off with the entry level here, the graduate program here, I'll share some of the experiences which I have seen, especially about the talent which was available internationally and what's available in the Indian context. I think in my career, I would have hired more than I mean, of course, that's not only me directly, but also through my teams. I would have hired close to 8,000 GETs, some 1,200 odd management trainees, and some 500 to 600 odd CAs here in my career in India. Internationally, I would have hired close to 300 graduate professionals. By graduate professionals, we include MBAs there, and roughly about 100 actuaries and chartered accountants. What struck me here is what differentiates the Indian talent from the global talent here. So one area where I found, let me talk about the strengths which we carry as Indian talent, especially when hiring engineers here. And I'm talking about a tier 1 engineers here. I found our technical talent to be extremely strong. People very, very competent, very analytical in thinking. I think we clearly compare to some of the best in the world in terms of our technical knowledge and in terms of analytical thinking from the tier 1 institutes. Where do we really fall short? I think is the personal impact. Global talent which we have, and what I've seen in Cambridge, I've seen in Oxford, their awareness at a global level is much, much higher. Their ability to research is much, much higher. The time which they spend in reading is much higher. The way they communicate, the way they express themselves is at a very, very different league. Very precise in communication, very confident in communication, and they talk sense. So I think that is a key differentiator which I have seen in talent profiles. So if we are to compete with talent at a global level, and incidentally, in my previous organization, Prudential ran a global talent program, out of which we had a lot of people from India also applying, management grads from India applying, engineers from India applying for that, chartered accountants from India applying. So out of 100 people who applied, only 7 of them got through in the initial batch. Whereas somebody in the UK applying, the same percentage here out of 100 of similar qualifications, similar background, almost 55 of them got through. So you see the stark difference in terms of the selection ratio. So the initial entry level, all things put equal in terms of the qualification, the basic analytical tests, I found both the talent to be equally competitive. Where they lost out was largely around a global perspective, broad-based thinking, strategic thinking, and knowledge of the global markets. For multinational companies, a global orientation becomes extremely critical, and some of the softer skills, the ability to work with diversity, becomes extremely critical. The way you express yourself, the personal impact which you make becomes extremely critical. So these are dimensions which differentiate global talent vis-a-vis local talent here. So just a quick question here. How many of you are aspiring, within the room, you are aspiring to do global jobs? Can I have your hands up, please? So I see a fairly large percentage here. So I think these fundamental competencies and capabilities will help you get there. Now these capabilities and competencies are not developed overnight. They don't come overnight. They come at the very beginning stage of your career. Now there is a lot of work which is available. There are a lot of insights. You can just Google it up, and various organizations have their own competency models here. You can research it. But if you have to be competitive globally, you have to be willing to stretch that extra mile. It's not an easy place there. You are competing with the best of the best in the world. You need to be sharper in terms of knowledge. You need to be sharper in terms of personal impact. And obviously you need to be sharper in various other competencies like customer orientation, your problem solving skills, your ability to work with diversity, your ability to work as a team player, and your ability to work collaboratively. These are all critical competencies and dimensions here. How do you develop them? I think there are various ways here, and you don't have to go into the professional world to develop them. When you interact with people, that's the best way of learning. Whether it's your home, whether it's amongst your colleagues here, and when you get to your workplace, it's your daily interactions which will teach you a lot in life. I think the best way to learn about people is interacting with people. No book can teach you that, to be honest. So I think this is one area. If we are aspiring to be global professionals, we would need to work on that domain here. As talent, clearly, even for Indian organizations when we are hiring, I mean, I worked in Indian organizations, I think subject matter expertise is very critical. So whenever you are facing interviews in your job, at least one of the critical parts, apart from the scores which you get in your curriculum here, is the basic knowledge which you carry. If your fundamentals are not strong, there are two things here which reflects. One, of course, is, you got there, you managed to get your marks here, but you don't have the insight. Your analytical skills aren't there where they should be. Second is, there is also an ownership and a reflection on the institute which you represent. It shows that the level and the curriculum of your institute isn't robust enough. I mean, I'm not talking about any one particular institute as such. I remember when I'd gone to a campus interview, and one of our criteria there is, when you're hiring MBA grads there, they should be a graduate, an engineering graduate with a first class, and an MBA graduate again with a first class there. So on the first day, we had about 12 vacancies, and we hired about, we had about close to 65 people applying. But at the end of the day, we didn't even take one graduate there. The first thing we found there is their basics weren't there in place. So when you ask them very fundamental questions, they're just not there. Second, when we asked them, what is your favorite subject? And we probed a little more in detail, they just didn't have the right answers. Third, when we told them, how are you going to apply it in the workplace? There wasn't any thinking in that space. So after that, we stopped going to that institute, which clearly showed that yes, you have a number of people who've done well academically, but when it comes down to application, we aren't getting the right kind of talent available. So unfortunately, I'm not saying the institute was bad, don't get me wrong there. The institute was good in its own right, fairly reputed, but the institutes of that batch didn't reflect well on the institute. And when a corporate goes out there, there is a fair bit of investment in time of corporate managers, both in terms of time as well as energy. So when you go out there, you would really expect the best of the best to be put forward to you. And so the point which I'm trying to make here is, the ownership would lie with you on how well you represent yourself as well as your institute when you go to a corporate for an interview. So these are some of the fundamentals here where I just thought I'll highlight certain experiences when we are talking about the kind of talent which we look at when we are hiring people in the market. The other part here I'll talk about is, in terms of when you are planning your own career, there are different, paths which a person can take. People can take a generalist path or a leadership path, and there are people who may want to be technical or functional experts. I think no career path is wrong. When we talk about career, it's an individual's prerogative or an individual's choice on how to plan their career. A very quick question before I move on to a presentation here, which will talk to you about certain fundamental steps of career planning. How many of you aspire to be CEOs here? Can I have your hands up, please? Okay. Fine. How many of you aspire to be CXOs or Chief Operating Officers? Okay. Fine. So aspirations are great. It's always good to have aspirations. How many of us are clear? What does it take to become a CEO? Can I have your hands? Okay, I think that answers it all. See, aspirations are extremely important. I mean, to reach a particular level, you have to have that fire in the belly. You need to have the drive, you need to have the energy. But you also need to know what does it take to get there. And in this presentation, I'll probably share with you what does it take to get there. So if you have an aspiration to become a functional head, if you have an aspiration to become a CFO, if you have an aspiration to become a head of HR, if you have an aspiration to become a chief marketing officer in a company or a chief operating officer of a company, what is the career path which you need to take? And if you want to become a CEO of the company, what is the career path which you need to take, and what are some of the basic competencies which you need to have which differentiate you at various levels. So I'll just quickly share that here, and post that I'll leave some time for question and answers here. So in this presentation, I'll cover consideration points for career planning. I'll talk about the career pyramid. I'll talk about what are the various paths available, the generalist path, functional path, and the skills required. Fundamental points for career planning, it starts with the aspiration. It was good to see some of us having aspirations here. In fact, a lot of us having aspirations. That is pretty positive. Second, it talks about the individual's capability. And when we're talking about the individual's capability here, is the individual's capability to deliver in terms of the current role, as well as the individual's potential to take on higher level roles. The individual's learning ability, and obviously it also depends on the being in the right place at the right time and the roles being available in the organization. The career pyramid here. Has anyone seen the career pyramid? Okay. Now the career pyramid, it can be fairly, the pyramid is fairly basic here, but every organization or every individual when they start their career, other than of course an entrepreneur, you start by playing the role of an individual contributor. You land up being accountable for doing a particular part of the job. So even in the individual contributor level, you grow up the ladder here. You start as a trainee, you join a particular organization, you're not very comfortable, you don't know what needs to be done in the job, you're still learning. So you have a guide, you have a mentor, somebody who takes you through that. So once you become more proficient in terms of doing the job, then you move down to managing people and ensuring that you get people to do that job for you. Then you move on to heading a department, and then you move on to heading an organization. So that typically is a career trajectory which you would follow. Obviously, if you choose to take the path of a CEO, you need to follow a very different career path or a career trajectory. And if you choose to be a functional expert, you will follow a very different career path and a trajectory. I'll start with the generalist career path here. For those aspiring to be a managing director, these are the various stages which you will follow. Now, each of these stages would have various sub-stages to it. And when we're talking about sub-stages in this case, it would vary from organization to organization. It's dependent on how large your organization is. It's also dependent on, what are the bands within your organization. It's also dependent on how geographically spread your organization is. So there are a number of variables attached to it. I'll start first with the individual contributor level. So even if you aspire to be a managing director, you will start at an individual contributor level. At an individual contributor level, you will do a particular job. You will prove yourself successful in doing that job. Then you will move on to doing more complex roles. When we talk about more complex roles, roles which require you to take a certain amount of decisions, roles which require you to interact with stakeholders, roles which require you to be more independent. Your success as an individual contributor lies before you make a start. As a start, you have somebody who's supervising you, giving you inputs, giving you guidance on how to do your job. But if you are able to do that job individually, independently, without guidance, it means you are successful as an individual contributor. And when you are successful as an individual contributor, when you are independent as an individual contributor, you are ready to do a people manager's job. And that's where you move to the people manager's level. Once you've done a people's manager job, then you land up doing more complex people manager's job, and you make lateral moves there. You make 2 or 3 lateral moves as a people manager, and then you move on to doing a functional head here. And as a functional head, if you choose to do, if you choose to aspire to be a managing director, then you follow multiple career paths. And having done the role of 2 or 3 functional heads, then you are ready to do the job of a managing director. Let me talk an example closer to home here. I'll talk about Vodafone here, Vodafone Shared Services. Now, every organization has a managing director. We are an 8,000 strong organization into IT-enabled services. I'll give you a bit of a context, and then I can talk to you about a career path within Vodafone here. So an 8,000 strong enterprise dealing with 23 countries for Vodafone globally, having multiple business lines. That's what our complexity is. So one business line On the higher part of the value chain is our technology shared services, where we have where we are into product design, where we are into application design, and where we do complex pieces of work like SAP. Then you have fairly basic plain vanilla skills of customer operations, where we have both a voice-based process, which is a call center for UK, for Ireland, as well as India here. And you have non-voice, which is email and web chat facilities which we offer. So that's another line of business. Then you have finance shared services, where we have verticals like record to report, P&A, travel and expense, which has its own set of complexities. Then you have business intelligence and analytics, another vertical, where we take care of customer analytics, predictive analytics here. So then we've got HR shared services, where we do work, including setting contracts for Vodafone's senior management team. Their contracts are drafted here. So that is a kind of complexity and the size and scale which we offer for for the entire Vodafone group of companies globally. Now, if someone is to head shared services in India, there are various competencies. If a person is to be the managing director here, the person has to exhibit a highly differentiated set of competencies as compared to maybe a smaller organization in this case. So a managing director, if somebody aspires to be a managing director, and the skills which we look at, either in terms of hiring a managing director or developing a managing director, is one, is the ability to manage size, scale, and complexity. Second, the ability to manage senior level stakeholders. Third, the ability to influence stakeholders. Because when we're talking about shared services in Vodafone, we are talking about we are also competing with 3 other shared services centers globally. We are competing with Egypt, we are competing with Hungary, we are competing with Romania there. So somebody who can clearly create that differentiated competitive advantage for us. So somebody who's got that strategic thinking, that visioning. Somebody who's able to, on the leadership side, hire the right people. Of course, we in HR support the managing director in ensuring that we hire the right people, and who's able to create the right kind of succession. So these become critical competencies at very senior level for us to look at when we are making a managing director here. So a person who starts at an individual contributor and till the time they move on to a functional head role will have to exhibit these competencies. So this is what we look at. In their career path, in their achievements, whether we look at a person laterally or whether we groom a person internally, they would need to go through that. So typically, if a person, let's say a person joins us as an individual contributor, either as a chartered accountant or as a graduate engineering trainee, how will they typically move on here to doing a managing director's job? A person who joins us as an engineer here or a management graduate in the IT or technology shared services will land up doing more and more complex work. They'll be responsible for more and more countries which they represent. Initially, they'll be responsible for one particular account. Then they will land up managing multiple accounts. After they manage multiple accounts, they will move on to doing a people manager's job. They will have multiple people reporting into them for multiple accounts covering multiple geographies. Then they will move on to taking a more, a lateral move where they will move on to a different line. So somebody in our testing function will then move on to products and services, which means they would, sort of be restarting all over again. And once they've done 2 or 3 shifts here in 2 or 3 different sub-verticals within technology, they are then ready to do on the level and role of a head of technology shared services, covering 3,500 people across 4 centers in India. To get to that level from an individual contributor and to a functional head, a fast tracker can take about anywhere between 12 to 14 years or 12 to 15 years to get there, a fast tracker. But a person who's an average performer can take anywhere 20 years plus to get there. So once a person, let's say, has headed technology shared services, then they would need to head maybe 2 other business lines and 1 support line to qualify as a managing director in our organization. So when we talk about a business line, maybe a technology head, head of technology shared services could then head customer operations for us. and one support function. That support function could either be, of course, legal, and compliance is a highly technical role, so it's unlikely they'll be given that. But they may be given the role either in finance, IT, or in HR. And then they would be reassessed and seen whether they are ready to do a managing director's job. So this is the path here. I just thought I'll probably share an example a little closer to home and our organization, which people can adopt. The guiding principles will more or less remain same in every organization. There would be a slight difference here and there, because every organization has their own set of competency framework. They have their own assessment criteria to get there. But these are some of the fundamental building blocks which will get there, which will help you get there in case you aspire to be the managing director of a company here. So that is a career path which you can choose. Of course, the other career path here is moving on to a functional-led. A functional-led career path, some of us may aspire that, fine, I would just like to be a head of HR, or I would like to be a head of finance, a CFO, or I would like to be the head of IT, or I would like to become the chief marketing officer of a company which I represent. There your career path will be very different. So as a managing director level, your focus would be largely on building your strategic thinking, your leadership competencies, and having a reasonable level, a high level overview of various functions and roles. Whereas if you head a function, you would need to have a very detailed appreciation. You cannot afford to be a jack of all trades. You will have to have a very detailed appreciation of various roles here. Now, if you want to become the CMO in a company, you have to have a stint in sales. You have to have a stint in working in various parts of the country. You can't say that I'll keep myself locationally bound and I'm going to be only in, in a Bombay, a Pune, or a Delhi, etc. So to become a head of sales, first to become a CMO, you will have to do a head of sales job or you will have to do a head of products or brands job there. So you have to have an experience in both roles there to do a CMO's job. There are people who get there without that experience, but the moment they get there, we actually see there is a difference in terms of their ability to contribute and deliver. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule. But to do that job effectively, a rounded and in-depth experience is very important. Likewise, how many people do you have from an HR background here? Can I have your hands up, please? Okay, fine. So now typically what I also talk about colleagues here is those who are interested in doing the role of a head of HR here. They need to have multiple experiences. Now, of course, there is one part of HR which is the more glamorous part of HR, like talent, learning and development, etc. But only doing a talent or a learning development job is not going to get you there. You have to start at the fundamental level. You need to know your basics very, very clear. You need to do a job which is a personnel kind of a job. You need to understand statutory compliance there. You need to understand industrial laws. Otherwise, you will not be able to take the right decisions. So start at the grassroots level. You need to understand what payroll management is. Then you need to move on. Once you've done the basics, got your fundamentals clear, then you move on to more progressive roles like compensation benefits, learning and development, reward and recognition, employee engagement, talent management, learning and development. And to do these multiple jobs, you require multiple level of knowledges. You require in-depth technical expertise. And how do you get that technical expertise? You get it through various programs, which are different organizations run different programs here. Some of them run certification programs, some of them run classroom training programs and master classes. But you acquire that over a period of time. You also acquire that by working with the right kind of people, through coaching, through mentoring, etc. And of course, a lot of it also comes with the self-interest which you take to acquiring the same skills. So once you've done those basic roles, you move on to managing people, managing clusters here, and then you finally head a function. So that's how your path becomes a little different. Whereas to become a CEO, you don't have to do so much of in-depth knowledge in various sub-verticals here. You have to have an overview, a strategic overview. You should understand what each function does, do multiple roles, and then get there. Whereas in a technical role or in a functional role here, you do need to have in-depth technical knowledge, in addition to strategic thinking, leadership skills, the ability to manage stakeholders, the ability to be customer obsessed, etc. To becoming an SME coach mentor. That measures your success as an individual contributor. As a people manager, you start with by having a working knowledge of operating tasks of the team. You build strong process improvement orientation. You develop the ability to coach and develop the team, setting clear directions. Then you develop the ability to think operationally, tactically, and handling those roles independently. Then you develop the ability to foresee risks and mitigate them to achieve functional objectives. That is where you reach the goal from a basic fundamental people manager to a people manager who has the ability to be considered for doing a head of the function role there. As a head of the function here, the key competencies is you should have a working knowledge of key operating processes of the team, have the ability to coach and develop teams setting clear objectives, have the ability to understand organization business priority and align them functionally here. See, this is one thing which I've also seen in my career. You cannot be a standalone function in its own right. Every function exists to enable business. So having the right kind of business orientation is very important. You may be a very strong technical functional expert, but if you aren't able to value add or contribute or align to business, it doesn't really have the right kind of impact for business. So that clearly differentiates a head of the department from a business manager's role here. In addition, having the ability to set a clear strategic direction for the team along with very, very clear milestones in terms of what needs to be done are some of the basic competencies which you would need to acquire and develop to get to a head of the department role. Now it could be a head of HR, head of finance, CMO's job, etc. here. So these, I thought I'll probably highlight are some of the key cornerstones or foundation stones here for you to set out when you are looking at your career at the initial stages. Some of you who aspire to be, CMOs, CFOs, heads of HR, or some of you who aspire to be CEOs of companies. So while of course, just to quickly recap, aspirations are great, but you should have a very clear path to get there. And that path has to be backed up with very, very clear competence at each and every stage. So at every stage, you need to be measuring your competence and your capability to get there. It isn't an easy world out there, highly competitive, and in today's world, it's just the survival of the fittest. Until you don't have a clear differentiated edge, you will be left behind. Last but not the least, I'll just quickly go back to the pyramid here. The pyramid, the base of the pyramid is very, very large. So there are a number of people there. But at the apex of the pyramid, it's very, very steep. So not too many people get there. And what differentiates people at the base of the pyramid is competencies at each and every level. So if you are to make a career, I would say the biggest contributor towards shaping your career and your destiny is you. And the right time to start is at the very early stages, and the right time to start is now. So that's one thing I thought I'll just probably leave these thoughts with you. The last thing I'll probably talk to you about my own personal experiences and how has my career grown as an individual. And I'll just take about 10 minutes and then I'll leave it open to questions and answers. So as mentioned earlier here, my basic degree is in mechanical engineering. So having worked in mechanical engineering after campus, I got a job there. I worked in an engineering firm straight from campus, was pretty excited. When I started my career, I think I got a princely sum in those days, and I'm talking about 1992, a princely sum of 4,500 rupees a month, which was a very good salary. And out of 4,500 rupees a month, I used to save 2,000 rupees a month after spending things pretty lavishly. So the kind of salaries which you have today are very, very different, but at that time it was a very good salary. So from that, when I did my first job on the shop floor, after 6 months, I recalibrated my thinking, my career. So I decided, rather than spending the rest of my life working with machines, I'm a little more passionate working with people. So that gave me only two choices. I do my master's here, and in doing my master's, again I had two choices. When it comes down to people, there are only two roles here. So it's either marketing or in HR. So did my master's here. I did a major in sales and marketing and a minor in HR. So it gave me a little bit of flexibility. Took up a job in Castrol, a sales job, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So from a sales job where my job was largely selling lubricants, automotive lubricants and industrial lubricants, to a very diverse set of customers here, which ranged from mechanics, truck drivers, spare part shop owners, to I would say OEM engineers in a Maruti, in a Bajaj Auto, etc., which required a very different kind of technical selling. So moving in there, I got the opportunity to work in Gillette, and from selling lubricants there, I moved on to hiring people, to train people, as well as incentivize people into selling blades and batteries in Gillette. And that's where my foray in HR happened. And I've been in HR since then. So in HR, I've done a variety of roles. And like I said, my aspiration in the early part of my career was to do the job of a functional head, reach that level and then consolidate. So for that, I've done multiple roles, and those multiple roles have given me that depth of experience to do my current role. So I've done the role of a head of recruitment, I've done the role of a head of talent, I've done the role of a head of operations, I've done the role of a head of compensation and benefits. So these multiple roles have equipped me with the right kind of technical knowledge to do my job effectively. I've done an international stint also as the head of talent for UK, Europe, and for India as well. And there my role has been largely in terms of designing, in my previous organization, was designing the talent strategy for the board level, for Prudential PLC, looking at succession planning right from the CEO to his direct reports. Who are the possible people who can do various jobs there? What are the qualities and traits which they need to have? And what kind of development do we need to give them to do that job? So that was one of my roles. Second role was identifying middle level managers who are capable and competent and who can do senior management roles in the future. And last was identifying managers globally, the young talent here, who can be groomed to do future level leadership roles in 10 to 12 years down the line. So there it involved assessment centers. I've also been trained on assessment centers and development centers from Prudential. I've also been trained to be a certified coach. I've also been through a series of certification, both sponsored by the organizations I've worked, as well as areas where I've also made the investment in upgrading my own skills and competencies. So when you look at careers here, there are different ways to achieving a career. But the fundamental rule here is always equip yourself with skills, capabilities, and competence. Keep asking yourself this question year on year. What is it that I have learned this year at any stage of your career, whatever your number of years of experience? What is it that I have done differently in this year? What is it that I have acquired in terms of skills, knowledge, or experience in this year? If you don't have an answer at the end of 1 year, you've actually wasted 1 year of your life. And every year of your life is very critical and important in your career, because a year gives you a very clear differentiated edge. Second, always do a comparison with yourself, not only internally within your organization, but also externally. Benchmark yourself. When you're benchmarking yourself, don't benchmark yourself against designations. Don't benchmark yourself against what salary is my peer or my batchmate drawing. Benchmark yourself. How much have I gained in terms of skills, capability, and competence? I'm sure you've seen this movie, Three Idiots. How many of us have seen this movie? I think truly a revolutionary movie which talks about absolute fundamentals and basics. And I remember the saying there which he had said, and I firmly believe in that, is अपने आप को काबिल बनाओ, कामयाबी आपके पास आ ही जाएगी at the end of the day. And that is exactly what you should focus. Make yourself capable, make yourself competent, success will follow. There are opportunities available. There is an availability, a dearth of talent in the market. I mean, today I am hiring 2,500 people year on year. I know what a struggle it is to get the right kind of people. When we try to sell India as a country to our global stakeholders, we tell them India is churning out 3 million graduates year on year. The fundamental question which our global stakeholders ask us, and we know the answer, is how many of these 3 million graduates are employable? How many of them can you just lift and shift and deploy them on the job? We don't have a good answer here. We have numbers, we have the quantity, but quality is a bit of a challenge. So I think there we need to make, even as a country, we need to make a lot of investment in making our people skill ready. It's not about acquiring degrees. Believe me, degree is only a passport to get you a job, irrespective of wherever you come from. Once you are into a job, it is purely your capability and your competence which matters. So work hard, and work hard year on year towards becoming more capable and competent. And the journey never stops. And you have never learnt enough all the time. So that's the message which I would like to leave you all with. I'm sure you'll have more than 25 to 30, or in some of your cases, even more than 30 years of career with you ahead. What you make of your career is purely up to you here. And don't wait for 5 years, 6 years. Start right now. This is the right starting point. Make yourself capable. Try to gain experiences. Learn the right things. Seek mentors and compare yourself globally. I think that will clearly give you a differentiated edge. It's a tough market out there. Survival of the fittest, Darwin's theory. Only the fittest will survive in years to come. And we are already seeing the impact in global markets. In global markets, having worked in the UK there, you see redundancies hitting. People are losing jobs there in UK, in Europe, and they're doing it at our expense. Today in India, why are jobs coming to India? Because of the cost advantage, the cost arbitrage advantage. But if we don't demonstrate capability and competence, it's a matter of time before we lose our cost advantage or cost arbitrage to other countries like Philippines, Sri Lanka, I would say even Bangladesh. So that's where I think it's all up to us here, not only to make our careers here, but also to shape the destiny of the country. So with that, I would like to wish you all the very best in your career, and I would also like to leave the floor open for any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Good evening, sir.
Yep.
This is Lalit Clay from BITM Telecom Batch. Sir, since Vodafone has become a second largest telecom service operator with 166 million customers, leaving Idea, BSNL and Reliance back. So my question is that how this Vodafone company as a foreign brand has built up a trust in a Indian customer. What is the key factor even Vodafone is facing the telecom regulatory issues?
See, there are two components to it. I'll give you a bit of a context before I answer your question directly. Vodafone in India has two distinct organizations. One is a telecom company, which is a very different organization, and second is a shared services. So I represent shared services here. I don't represent the telecom company. However, being an employee of Vodafone, I can definitely answer this question here. What has really made the differentiator here? Now, Vodafone globally has also grown through a series of acquisitions. Now, this company which we've acquired, it started off by being called Orange, then it moved on to Hutch, then it moved on to SR, and then finally we've acquired the stake from SR here. How has it got us to number 2? The telecom industry in India is a highly regulated industry. You have bids for various circles there, and you need to bid competitively. So of course for that, one of the things which has helped us is being cash rich. We've got very high liquidity reserves. So that I think has been helpful, where we've been able to bid in the right way and get the right licenses. So that is only the initial part. Once you've got the license, there have been other companies also which have got licenses, but what has truly helped us is our core value of operating with speed, simplicity and trust, and being customer obsessed. And that you will find it demonstrated in every employee in Vodafone, which you have there. I think that's what has got us to the number 2 position. But when we talk about number 2 position, it's not only about the number of customers which we service or the market share we have. I think business is all about the bottom line as much as the top line. So I think in terms of the top line, we are number 1 today. And I think that's what Vodafone aspires to be also. It's not about only being number 1 in volumes or numbers, but it's also being number 1 in the bottom line, because at the end of the day, business is all about a beta and making money. So I think we've got to a fairly good state this year. But I think it's our core values which have got us there. And the fact is, we also believe a lot in innovation. And we've got a very, very strong R&D team which keeps innovating and offering new and new products and services to our customers. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. I'm Bhavna from BIIB. My question is, people are hired on the basis of skills, education and experience, but how can we decide that the person will fit to our organization culture?
Yeah, I think a good question here. For us, culture fitment becomes extremely critical. At the very, very initial level, we do look at the technical skills, capabilities and competence. But when it comes down to culture fit, every organization has their own definition of what do you mean by a culture fit. The way we assess people is on the basis of our values. Our values are speed, simplicity and trust. So we look at individuals who operate with speed. We look at people who demonstrate trust. We look at people who keep things simple and not complex. In addition to that, there are certain sub-competencies which we look at. One competency is called applied thinking, which means can a person analyze the situation? Can a person look at the grassroots of the problem here? Do they have the ability to deep dive? Do they have the ability to come out with multiple options? So these are all areas which we look at. Is a person customer obsessed? Is a person willing to stretch the extra mile? If there is a customer complaint, if there is a breakdown in network, will our IT team be willing to respond to the challenge at 2 a.m. in the morning, or the person says my working hours are over and I'll address the problem tomorrow? If the second is the answer, clearly the person is not a culture fit for us. So these are some of the traits which we look at. So we've got our own definition for assessing culture fit. We do it in a variety of ways. We do it through the interview. We also do it through psychometric assessments. Yeah, but being a culture fit is extremely important for us. We've turned down some very bright people because we were convinced they wouldn't be culture fits for us. And I'm not talking only at the entry level, I'm talking at the leadership level as well, at a vice president level as well.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
So my name is Sachin Dwivedi. I'm from BITM Telecom batch, and my question is, Vodafone is always being considered as a company which gives lot of emphasis on safety and security of its employee.
Right.
At the time when the whole nation is concerned about the women's safety, what steps does Vodafone is taking in this direction? And as an HR, what challenges have you faced in the recent times in terms of women's safety?
Yeah, I think a good question here. Diversity and inclusion is a very important, a broader part of our agenda, both from an organization perspective as well as from an HR perspective here. From an organization perspective, the sponsorship starts at the CEO level and then it moves down to my level here. So when we talk about health, safety and well-being, we've got a vertical called HSW, or health, safety and well-being. So to start with here, we've got global standards on 7 absolute rules of safety. Now 7 absolute rules of safety could be as basic as wearing a helmet to your workplace. So people who ride two-wheelers, don't wear helmets, can actually be terminated in Vodafone. So I mean, it goes to that extent of severity, and that's how we value safety. The reason here is not because it's a global policy, but because we value safety as a culture, and we believe that every individual's life is very important. Translating it here in terms of your direct question, when it comes down to addressing the issue of current challenges at the workplace, women's safety, we have a diversity and inclusion forum which is headed by a senior person at the level of a director who is a lady candidate here. And being compliant with the laws of the land, we also have a committee which is called the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Committee. So we do a number of training programs for all managers. All people managers are covered on safety here. All people managers mandatorily are covered under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. Everyone is covered there, and there is a zero tolerance. We've had cases in Vodafone where there have been complaints, and we follow a zero tolerance policy, and it is direct termination for the employee. Of course, we follow a fair investigation process as well, and an elaborate investigation where both sides of the party are given an opportunity to very neutrally assess their case. We also have an NGO who partners us in this. For some of our women employees, we also run certain master classes like self-defense programs, safety tips, do's and don'ts. For all our women employees who work after 8:30 p.m. at night, we offer a safe and a secure drop to their workplace, accompanied by a security guard. So we take care, to answer the question here, it's extremely important for us, and we are doing a number of initiatives to ensure that. So far, we have not had any incident, other than we've had a couple of instances of complaints of sexual harassment, and we have terminated the employee over there. But other than that, we've not had any issue or a concern.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. It's Binu Krishnan, BIIM. Sir, my question is related to the tax dispute which Vodafone is facing with the government of India. And even though you got a judgment, favored judgment from the Supreme Court, but still the issue is in the air. So what is the, the confidence level that a foreign investor is getting to invest in India? And what is the new government? The new government is a business pro government. What is your take on this? And one more question. Vodafone is always, very creative in their advertisements and all those things like Susu advertisement, and before also Hutch come with the Chinese pug. And those ads are very creative and innovative. But in the recent 1 year or so, you are not coming with it's my observation, you are not coming with a very catchy advertisement or what. So what is the problem?
Okay, so I'll answer both your questions here. I think the first question in terms of the current tax dispute within Vodafone and what is the level of Vodafone PLC's confidence and trust in terms of investing. I'll give you a bit of a context here. Some of it, obviously, I can talk, but some of it we would choose not to talk about it because it's confidential and related to the organization. So I'll start with what I can actually share and which is a ground reality. The tax dispute of Vodafone is purely a legacy issue, something which Vodafone has inherited, not created. That inheritance and that creation has come from the time where we have acquired Hutchison's share. To give a bit of a context around that, Vodafone had acquired Hutchison's share through Vodafone Holdings, our holding company in Mauritius, which attracted a tax liability. The erstwhile, finance minister at that time, who later on became the president of the country, had passed a regulation that this tax was to have been paid retrospective. So Vodafone's dispute was that we will pay it. I mean, fine, if there is a change in regulation, being good corporate citizens, we will pay the tax, whatever is required. I mean, change in regulation can happen at any point of time. But being retrospective, I think when you are introducing a new law should not be made retrospective. A new law should be implemented as on date. So I think that is where the dispute was. It's currently sub judice being handled at the court level, and I'm not in a position to talk and comment on that. But yes, how do we see it in the future? Yes, we see a resolution coming our way, and in no way has it let down the confidence of Vodafone PLC to invest in India. In fact, Vodafone PLC, and that's already come in the newspaper, so I don't have to tell you stuff which is confidential, is that Vodafone PLC has already indicated a keenness to acquire and make Vodafone India Limited a 100% subsidy. Of course, subject to the laws of the land and approval from the FIPB, the Foreign Investment Promotion Board. So the keenness, the appetite is there, and a chairman has already come down here, and he also visits us in another couple of weeks. So there is great investor confidence. India is one of the top 5 contributing companies to Vodafone globally out of the 23 countries. We are currently generating about close to $6 billion in revenues, almost about, and contributing to about almost 20% of Vodafone's revenues globally. Investor confidence in Vodafone very high, keenness to make it as a subsidiary very high, subject to following the laws of the land. So that hasn't diluted the tax liability hasn't diluted that. One of the key reasons is India is a very important strategic market for Vodafone. We've got a very good talent here. We've got a list of very satisfied customers here, a strong presence in the country and a very strong network. So clearly we see India as a market for investing in the future. And of course, talking a little more closely with respect to the company I represent, Vodafone Shared Services Limited, or Vodafone Shared Services India, we are 100% subsidiary of Vodafone anyway. So, and the fact is, we are currently 8,000. We are hiring about 2,500 people year on year. And these 2,500 people do work for 23 operating companies in Vodafone globally. I think there couldn't be a stronger measure of confidence of Vodafone than that. So that's where I would say, to answer your first question. And your second question regarding the advertisements not being creative, etc. So probably this is not a line of business which I represent. I can definitely share this feedback with some of my colleagues in Vodafone India Limited to possibly see what they can do in this space. Thank you.